Kirk Cousins, Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs, and Derrick Henry all changing teams this last week and changing the fantasy football landscape. Today we're talking the 10 most important signings for fantasy football free agency so far. My name is Cameron Lawrence, and I want to welcome you to the Fantasy Football Fellas YouTube channel. We're going to start with our number one most important signing. This shouldn't be a surprise. It has to be Kirk Cousins going to the Atlanta Falcons on a 4-year, $180 million contract, $100 million guaranteed for a guy who's 36 years old, coming off an Achilles tear. And the most important thing about this isn't for Kirk himself, right? He's honestly moving to a pretty similar situation that he was in right now, but it's for Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson, and even Darnell Mooney, who just signed on there. These guys are going to be unlocked. They're out of Arthur Smith jail. They have a competent quarterback who can get them the ball. We can see Drake London as a top 10 wide receiver. We can see Kyle Pitts top 5. We can see Bijan as the RB1. Not saying all three are going to happen, but the ceiling, the situation is now there for all of those things to happen. Number 2, we have Saquon Barkley signing with Philly, going to the division rival. He is dead to New York. He is dead to Tiki Barber on a 3-year, $37.5 million contract with $26 million guaranteed. It could be up to $48 million with incentives. If you want to hear the craziest part about that contract, him and the guy I just mentioned, Darnell Mooney, same amount of guaranteed money on their contract. And if you ask me, personally, I got to think Saquon's more important to the team than Darnell Mooney is, but I guess I don't know. So just a crazy stat I wanted to throw out there. But from a fantasy perspective, right, Saquon's got to have a high ceiling, right? It could be another top 5 year for Saquon. Put him on a great offense. DeAndre Swift, Miles Sanders both have rushed for 1,000 yards in back-to-back years on this team. Miles Sanders had 12 touchdowns. It's just going to be how much is that receiving work capped at, and how much are the touchdowns capped at with Jalen Hurts running the ball. But Saquon should be solidified as a top 5 option going into your fantasy drafts. Michael Pittman re-signed with Indianapolis. I know, it's boring. This isn't new. But it is huge for both him and Anthony Richardson. 3 years, $71 million, 46 guaranteed. He's essentially on the Colts for the rest of Richardson's rookie deal, which is big for him, right? You want to make sure Richardson isn't just throwing to nobody. Michael Pittman showed he had a great year last year, had 11-plus targets in his first 2 games with Richardson, 8-plus receptions in each. So I think both of them are going to benefit greatly from Pittman coming back. Number 4, we have Josh Jacobs going to the Green Bay Packers on a 4-year, $48 million contract. But I don't want you to be confused. Don't want you to be confused by this. This isn't 4 years for sure. He only has $12 million guaranteed. So this is essentially a 1-year, $12 million deal with 3 1-year, $12 million options after it. The Green Bay has an out after this year, next year, and the year after. So this isn't like your traditional 4-year deal. But for Josh Jacobs for this season, I honestly view him in the way that we viewed Joe Mixon on the Bengals the last couple of years before this last season, right? He could be a top 10 option. He has the ceiling to maybe finish top 4, but as a points per game, he's probably going to be around that top 10, probably top 10 to top 12. So that's where I view Josh Jacobs on the Green Bay Packers. 5, we have Baltimore signing Derrick Henry. And I think the whole NFL wanted this. You got Derrick Henry, you got Lamar Jackson, 2-year, $16.5 million contract, 9.5 guaranteed. No more Gus Edwards. J.K. Dobbins is still a free agent. Even if he comes back, those injuries, he's not really challenging for the starting role. Keaton Mitchell looked good in what we saw from him last year, but he'd be a change of pace back, especially coming off the ACL. Derrick Henry, I don't know if he has another season in him to be around that top 5. I think he could flirt with top 10. But I think we might be getting too excited come draft time on Derrick Henry just because he is going to be 30 years old. Number 6, we have Tennessee signing Calvin Ridley, and what was a shock, right? Tennessee before the signing plus 1,800 odds to sign Calvin Ridley, but he signs for a 4-year, $92 million contract, $50 million guaranteed. It is him, D-Hop, and Treylon Burks now on this offense. Obviously, they're going to treat him like the alpha with the money he just got, but Calvin Ridley will be turning 30 during the season this year. Hopefully, he can start to turn it around a little bit, but I think he's probably a mid to lower end wide receiver 2 on the season. I think D-Hop's going to be slightly behind him, and unfortunately, This feels like the end of the Treylon Burks experience. At 7, I got a combo here, and it's Baker Mayfield and Mike Evans re-signing with Tampa Bay. I know another re-signing. Mike Evans gets 2-year, $41 million, $35 guaranteed. Baker gets 3-year, $100 million, $50 guaranteed. But this is big because Baker was QB9 last year, mainly because so many quarterbacks didn't finish the season, but he was still solid around 18 fantasy points per game. And Mike Evans was the wide receiver 7, putting in work last year, so they're going to run it back. I think this is big for Mike Evans. I think this is big for Rachaad White as long as they don't bring in another dominant back. And so that is why I have this at 7. I just think it's big for those two. I think Baker has fantasy relevance, right? He's a good streaming option again this season if you want to buy low on a quarterback in Dynasty, similar to the way we did with Geno last season. I think that's kind of what you could do with Baker Mayfield in this situation. At 8, I have Aaron Jones. We talked about him earlier, going to the Vikings on a 1-year, $7 million deal. Obviously, it's going to depend a lot on who the quarterback is, but before last season, Aaron Jones had 4 straight seasons as a top 10 running back. 2 of those were top 5. And, me personally, as a Vikings fan, right, it hurt to lose Kirk, but we get Aaron Jones, who has been a Viking killer over his career. So to kind of get this back makes me pretty happy here. So that we have Aaron Jones at 8. At 9, Tony Pollard, 3-year, $21 million contract. If you talk to Lucas, one of the other fellas, if you're not familiar with our channel, he would tell you that Tennessee was the worst team during free agency. Crushed his hopes and dreams of both Tony Pollard and Tyjae Spears having fantasy relevance with this 3-year, $21 million, 10.5 guaranteed contract. Tyjae Spears last year, 52 receptions on 70 targets. What does that mean for both of them this season, fantasy-wise? That remains to be seen. I think it lowers the ceiling of both of them because both really make it happen out of the backfield catching the ball. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. And number 10, DeAndre Swift signing a 3-year, $24 million contract, 15.3 guaranteed. It'll be interesting. Khalil Herbert, Rashawn Johnson still on the roster. But obviously with this money, you're expecting Swift to be the head of what should be the three-headed monster. The only worry I really have is him losing goal line work to the other two. Hopefully the passing works up with Caleb Williams coming in. I'm not as excited about these last two guys, Tony Pollard and DeAndre Swift, I'm going to be honest. I think probably running back 15 to running back 12 range is where they're going to finish up. But, maybe even a little bit lower for Swift. So not super excited about those signings, but I understand it from an NFL's perspective. And then a quick honorable mention to Austin Eckler, Darnell Mooney, Joe Mixon, who I probably would have thrown up here, but it was a trade technically, and Gardner Minshew, who looks like he could be the starter on a 2-year, $25 million contract in Vegas. Talked about Mooney a little bit earlier. And then Eckler, right? He isn't the Eckler of old. We saw that last season. He looked a lot slower. He wasn't quite back with it. Only a 2-year, $11 million contract in Washington. Looks to be that Antonio Gibson-ish role, maybe a little bit better than that. But yeah, that wraps up the top 10 most important signings in fantasy football. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something. I hope this prepares you a little bit moving forward. Make sure to hit that subscribe button. Turn on those notifications. Drop a comment below on what you think the most important signings are if I missed anything from a fantasy football perspective, remember. But with that, we will see you next week, and deuces.